Welcome to the old man's corner. Grab up a chair and a cup of coffee and come on in. Back in 1981, I was in a horrendous accident that uh, my wife unfortunately passed in, and my niece unfortunately passed in, and my sister-in-law and myself were in the hospital with serious injuries. I had a fractured skull and a broken femur, so I was in traction for several days, and the doctors were afraid to work on me because they were afraid the fatty tissue that was inside the bone that had broken would seep into my bloodstream or into my lungs and cause me some complications. So as I laid there those days, the signs of that happening were showing up. My breathing had become very shallow, and of course I was also going through some grief at the time, and that didn't help matters. But it got to where I was not breathing well, and my heart rate had dropped severely, so they moved me to intensive care. On intensive care, it had gotten so bad they put me in a private room in intensive care that was glassed in so they could watch me. And I was laying in there, and of course, I had time to think over all that had just happened, and I was just laying there, and I guess I just had kind of given up a little bit, and next thing I knew, the light was kind of fading away, and it's faded into a kind of a dark gray and then into darkness. And I heard a very clear and distinct voice say, "It's not your time." And all of a sudden it started getting lighter and lighter, and it was bright, and I was back in the room. I was there in the room, and I had nurses standing up around me. The alarms went off because evidently my heart had stopped, and they were watching to see what was going to happen. And the first thing they said is that, "Don't do that. That you scared me." I said, "Scared you?" But anyways, I went through that, and after I heard that voice and came back, I realized that I had things I still had to do on this earth. I think the good Lord had decided that it was time. It wasn't time for me to go, and He just let me know very clearly in a very strong but gentle voice, telling me it was not my time. And so after that point, I started getting a little better, and they finally moved me back to the up onto the bone unit, and then we went in and did the surgeries and got that done. And then I made it. I was there, I think, 10 or 11 days, and then I got to. I was released to go home, and my parents had got there, and the rest of the family had got there. So they decided probably couldn't handle the drive home because it was going in Colorado all the way back to Kansas. So my mom and dad and we were going to fly back. So when we got to the airport and got on the plane, we had gotten coach tickets, all three of us. But my leg was, I couldn't bend my leg because I just had surgery on it, and still had staples all the way down through it, and I was on crutches. Well, they rolled me into the airplane in a wheelchair. But as I was getting on the plane, the stewardess that was at the beginning, she goes, "Those aisles down through there are very small, or not very wide." And she said, "I don't." She goes, "What happened?" I said, "Well, I was in an accident, and I can't bend my leg at this time. So she said, there's a seat right here in the front, right up in first class, right here. And she said, you sit down right here. And she says, I'll make sure, I'll guard that leg. I'll make sure nobody runs into it. Which that was very nice of her. And then my mom and dad ended up sitting back in coach, and I got a first class ride. Anyways, as I was there, of course I was on painkillers and such. That I wasn't feeling a whole lot of pain. And this is the first time I'd ever ridden on an airplane on top of that. Well, the gentleman that sat next to me, he had the window seat. He got talking to me and he asked me what had happened, and I told him I had been in a serious accident and that my wife had passed away, and that accident and stuff. He started telling me, he said, I asked him about him, and he goes, well, he was on his way back home. He had been in Alaska with his wife. They were kind of on a vacation, but he had a huge ranch in Texas. He said he had to get back to it, take care of a bunch of stuff, and then he was going to go fly back to Alaska to meet his wife. And we talked for quite a while, and he turned to me and he said, if you ever want to come, if you ever feel like you need to just get away, you just come down to my place. You can stay as long as you want. And I thought that was very nice of him. He didn't have to do that. I didn't even know the man. So that was an interesting thing. It showed compassion. I think God was showing compassion there as well as the stewardess that let me sit in the front. So we got home and got situated, and I had to get kind of a medical bed set up in the front room of my house. And it was very lonely there now that my wife wasn't there. And my mother and my dad just lived about a block away. And since I wasn't supposed to be getting up and walking around, my mom would make meals for me and bring them over to me. She'd walk them over to me. And I very much appreciated that. And we'd sit and talked a lot about faith and religion and our beliefs. And I had a nice talk with my mother. I had never sat down and talked with her that much. Well, the one day I was sitting there, laying there, and it was, I don't know, just about 30 days later, she didn't show up with my breakfast. And I thought, well, what's going on? Because she's usually there, and it was getting later, and she wasn't there. Well, then I got a phone call from my dad, and he was all hysterical. He said, Mom's laying on the couch, and she's not moving. And she's not moving. She's still on the couch. So I got up, and somehow I maneuvered those crutches anyways, and got over to their house on the crutches, and the police were already there. My mom had evidently passed away in the middle of the night. So this was just 1 month after my wife had passed away. So July and August of 1981 weren't very prosperous years or very good years, but God pulled us through it all. But now I think also I was able to console my dad some too, because I was already still going through the loss of my wife. So sometimes I think God, His mercy, He shows that through other people. He let me kind of speak with my mom about death and religion and going on in faith and what is to come. And I think it made her comfortable. And then my dad, I was able to sit with him and talk to him about, he was a fairly spiritual man. And I got to comfort him on the loss of his wife and the loss of my mother. So God works in mysterious ways, and sometimes ways we'll never understand. But if you had something like this happen, or you've seen God's hand at work in other people's lives or in your life, how you've dealt with tragedies, or how you've just dealt with other people who's had tragedies in their life and been able to console or counsel with them, let me know. Drop me a note down in the comments, and I sure would like to hear from him. So I love you all, and y'all have a great day.